Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I grew up in the FLDS community. It's a polygamous group run by Warren Jeffs, which I moved out of when I was 18 years old.
I was raised LDS. Sam and I have been married for 8 years now and have 2 beautiful babies together.
Yes, we do, and we're very excited to be back and to welcome a very, very special guest, Addi McCall. She has a very successful TikTok channel called Addi_McCall.
Yes, hi Addi.
Hi guys.
Oh my gosh, I've been so excited for this, like for weeks. I know we had to like set it up weeks in advance, but I've been like so excited and watching your TikToks like all the time. They always come up on my feed and I'm just like, oh, fangirling. Anyway,
Yes.
we've been so excited for this.
Very excited to have you on and to kind of discuss the differences and similarities between our two polygamous groups. Can you share with us a little bit about where you're from and I guess what your TikToks are about?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited. This is definitely something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I was born and raised here in Utah and then just have always, kept quiet about being from a polygamous family because it's kind of taboo to talk about. And then I started posting on TikTok and my first video about polygamy went viral and I woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to tell my parents, like, I don't want them to be bad. So I told them, I'm like, I'm not, sharing to hurt you. I'm sharing because it's interesting. And then from there, my TikTok just kind of grew and I wanted to debunk some of the misconceptions or like stereotypes of polygamy, because typically what you see is the Warren Jeffs group on shows and things like that. But I am actually from the AUB, which is the Apostolic United Brethren, also known as the All Red group, and it is the same one that Cody Brown is from. So
so many people ask us questions and they're like, what about Cody Brown? And we're like, we know nothing. And I never watched Sister Wives, and so I felt now we know where the connection is. So that's where
Sister Wives is based off of that group then. Okay.
Yeah. Christine was actually my primary teacher. So
really? Oh my word. Okay, we need to do like a watch party with you on that, because people are always like, will you react to Sister Wives? And it is like there's so many differences that sometimes when we'll like go to watch other shows like that, we're like, I don't even know what exactly. Anyway, people I'm sure would love if you did reactions to those. Yeah.
It's like, I love watching it though. It's like my guilty pleasure, but I love reality TV. So.
Oh my gosh, me too. Me too.
So fun.
Wow. So is that something that watching Sister Wives you can relate a lot to then, since they're from the same group, or is it TV and they changed it a lot?
Yeah. Do they dramatize it a lot, or is it like actually pretty accurate?
I think both. I think a lot of it's dramatized, but it's different than my family as well. And they've changed a lot over the years. I think they've all left the group as well. So.
Oh, wow. So where is the AUB located? Like it's in northern Utah, right?
Yeah. So
but I know like the Kingstons are like on the west side, right?
Yeah, I think so. Like further north.
Yeah.
The AUB is mostly located between like Salt Lake County and Utah County, kind of in there, but they really have groups all over. So like Montana, my family lives more down south, and then they have Mexico and Mesa. Like they've kind of got places everywhere.
Oh wow. Do you have any idea how many members still follow this religion?
When I was looking it up, they were saying that the last number was 10,000, around 10,000. So
okay,
there's a lot. Yeah,
that's a lot. That's like the height of the FLDS. Like when they had the most members was about 10,000.
Yeah,
that's a lot of people.
It is a lot, and it seems like a lot of these groups have more than you would think. Like the Kingston group as well, they have a lot of members. So 10,000. Wow. Okay, I didn't realize
they're all having a lot of kids.
That's gonna be my next question. So, how many mothers were there in your family?
So my dad has 3 wives, and my mom is the first wife.
Your mom's the first wife. Okay, with the first wife, I have to ask, because every time I talk to a girl who's left polygamy, there's been different people say, like, is it better to be the first wife? And like, was there anything like some of Sam's sisters were like, I always wanted to be the first wife because they had like a little bit more authority, could get away with more, or were considered the favorite. Was there anything like that regarding the first wife at the AUB?
I think so. Like definitely different for each family. I loved that my mom was the first wife, and I always said like I would want to be the first wife too, because you just get different experiences and things like that. I don't think that my mom is like that, like naggy, I get what I want, bossy. in that situation. But then like the third wife's kids definitely have more time than we ever did with my dad because they're younger. And so I think it's just different, you know?
Yeah.
Different dynamic.
Interesting. So 3 wives. In my family, we all lived in the same house. The moms were all in the same house, growing up together, one big family. Was that the same for you, or did you have separate homes like you see on some of the shows?
Yeah. So my family all has lived in one home. There was a little bit while we were building the new home where they had split up, but it's just one big home with different kitchens. So it's kind of like apartments in a sense. But I loved living in the same home with my siblings because it's so fun. You play with them, and
you always have a lot of friends to do stuff with.
Yeah.
I remember that too. I don't remember ever really being alone. There was always someone to play with.
Or something to do.
Yeah.
As far as marriages go out there, are they arranged marriages, or do people get to court and decide who they're going to marry?
It's typically a courtship. So you would pray about someone, and then you would go ask their dad, and then the leadership, and then from there you can start courting.
Okay. So ask permission, but they get to decide who they want to like pursue, as long as it's within the church, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And was there any like blood purity lines, like the Kingstons, like try to keep it, or was there a lot of like marrying cousins, or?
No.
Good.
Yeah, there's not, which is good.
Yeah, that's good.
I know people who have married like maybe their second cousin, but no one that I know is closer than that. Like even Mark and I are distantly related. And, but yeah, I think probably like second or further back, no one marries their first cousin or their niece or their sister.
Oh, good.
That's good to know. So these courtships, when they're trying to find someone to marry, it has to be, does it have to be approved by the church? And if so, do they have to only look for people to marry that are members of the church, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you would court outside of the religion unless you were leaving. Like if you're like, oh, I'm not gonna be here, I'm gonna date someone from high school or something like that. I think it does have to be approved, and I'm sure especially if it's a plural marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But so you get to from there you get to pick. You know?
Yeah. Okay. So did they even get to pick like their plural wives? They still prayed about and decided who they were gonna. And then did they court the other wives while being married?
Yes. So it's kind of like a triple date, triple date. I guess not a double date. 3 people. Sometimes.
So they take their first wives with them on the dates for the other wives.
Yeah.
Just or like to make sure it's gonna work out.
Yeah, you'll know someone's courting if you look over in church and he's got his hands out holding both his wife or a girlfriend and his wife.
Oh my gosh, so they were like the original throuples. Like they were cool before like this new whole wave of like, let's add a couple extra people. Like, oh my word. Okay.
This definitely is very unique from the FLDS then.
Okay, I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people know this already, but in the FLDS religion, courtship, dating, any of that kind of stuff was a big no-no. You were assigned the person you were to marry, and that was the final say. Wow. So very, very different. Yeah.
Was there a specific
and they're very
age?
fast. Oh, sorry.
They're very fast. No, go ahead. They're very fast. Go ahead.
So fast, like, because if you're going to be a second wife, like if you're going to marry them, you're going to be married within like probably 2 months, 3 months. Just because they're going to wait to kiss and all the things like that. But about the age, I would say 18 on up, which is good. There are like more things that I'm like, yes, this is much better than what it could be. My mom got married when she was 17, and then I have one sister that got married when they were 17, but other than that, it's like 18 on up.
Oh, that's good. At least they're adults for the most part. So that's good to hear.
For sure.
Yeah, that's not the same story for my group for sure. So that's very good to hear, and reassuring that there are people out there that are trying to, at least let people get to that adulthood. So you said that they're not even allowed to kiss during courtship?
Most of them don't. Some of my siblings, even that were the first wives, waited until they were married to kiss as well. So.
Oh.
Okay. Okay.
I can see why they would want to get married quickly then.
Yeah.
Well, that would be an intense 2 months of hand holding then, I guess, to decide if they were the right person.
If it fits right.
Just like squeeze tighter and tighter. I love you so much. That's interesting.
Oh man.
You know, I mean, it would have been such a different story, even for me. I left my group at 18 years old, and I think I probably would have lasted a lot longer in that group if dating was allowed. Because that was just one of the things that you get to 18 years old as a young boy, and you're not allowed to date. I mean, it was just,
or even talk to girls.
it was hard. Yeah.
Because that's natural. That's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that like comparing the things, I feel like the FLDS is definitely more strict and more like old fashioned with things, and then there's like the mainstream LDS church, and then the AUB is like kind of in the middle, but still has the doctrine, but more modern.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I feel like that happens with a lot of the other groups where, you know, we go to start comparing it with Sam's group, and then I'm like here in the middle, like being raised LDS. I'm like, okay, like I know we're both you know, yeah, I definitely feel like we're the middle ground of where everything is coming, or where you're the middle ground and I'm like one extreme and he's the other. Yeah, speaking of like its connections with the LDS church, do you want to kind of go over like where the ties, like where did the AUB break off? Because for any viewers that don't kind of know the basic history, Joseph Smith taught and practiced polygamy. Then after he died, Brigham Young brought the saints to Utah and continued on polygamy. In 1890, there was a manifesto saying no more polygamy, but really it's pretty clear that the government was saying you can't do this anymore. And so they said no, but even after that manifesto, like kind of proving it to the US that they weren't going to anymore, it still continued on for a while. And then they basically came out with a second manifesto saying, no, guys, really, we have to stop. This is now revealed from God, that we need to stop the practice of polygamy. So was it clear at that second manifesto that they split off? And do you know which prophet it was?
Who was your first prophet in the AUB?
So when I was looking back, the year 1954 is when Rulin Allred was the prophet.
Okay.
And he is the one that, well, as far as it went back, but then they go back to, you know, Brigham Young and Joseph Smith and things like that.
Smith.
Yeah. Rulin Allred is the one that was shot under the orders of Ervil LeBaron. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that story.
I've heard of the LeBarons, but I've not heard of this story. Please do tell.
It's super interesting. So Ervil LeBaron, from my understanding, it was kind of another break off polygamy, and he had it's the blood atonement that he was getting this direction under, and he basically had a hit list and ordered, I want to say it was maybe his wife and one of his daughters, I'm not exactly sure, to go kill the prophet of the AUB, Rulin Allred. And he was a chiropractor here in Salt Lake, and I think like a neuropathic type doctor, if I'm remembering right. And they walked into his office and shot him under the orders of Ervil LeBaron.
Oh my word!
Did he die? Did that shot kill him? Or? Oh my gosh! How did I not hear this?
No, and the LeBarons had their own.
Interesting.
The LeBarons have their own group still, don't they?
Yeah.
Because I've heard of the LeBarons.
Yes, I believe they do.
Don't they have part of their group is in Mexico? Maybe I'm getting that mixed up. Yeah. There's quite a few.
Yeah, they're actually related to my dad too, which is interesting. So.
Wow. Okay. See, because obviously I've heard of Rulin Allred, and in fact, there were a lot of Allreds in the FLDS community. So I know that the AUB and the FLDS were very closely connected during the beginnings of the church. In fact, a lot of your first prophets would have been best friends with some of the first prophets of the FLDS church. So very, very close connections. And I would hear about the Allred group from the FLDS all the time. Of course, in my group, they would say they're in the wrong, we're in the right. But at least like I had heard about your group.
Well, and at least you guys were a lot closer to the FLDS. Like they were told the LDS, the mainstream, we were the great and abominable church. So at least you weren't. You're just you're like one step off, but at least you weren't like as bad as we were. So that's something. Oh man. Yeah. So with the breakup, so they still believed in prophets. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I need to back up one thing real quick, because when you said blood atonement, sometimes Sam and I were just talking about this. Sometimes it's so easy for us to glaze over things that are like that we're already knowledgeable about or that we know about. And sometimes our viewers don't even know what that is. So for those of you that are out there going, what the heck is blood atonement? What does that mean? That started with Brigham Young, and Brigham Young had basically made a statement saying that it is better for their own blood to be spilt when people sin to a certain extent, then Christ's atonement won't cover. So their own blood has to be spilled to atone for their own sins. Do I have that right, Addi? Is that how you were taught it as well?
My understanding. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why they like would spill their blood.
Yeah. That new Hulu show, Under the Banner of Heaven. I'm pretty sure that was the same blood atonement. Like that's an example of it.
Yeah, and I think there's been multiple like groups and incidences where people have taken those words from Brigham Young and acted on them in ways that they felt like inspired to do so. So unfortunately, that's caused a lot of like pain and problems in a lot of different people's like.
And if I'm not mistaken, the whole blood atonement kind of started when Joseph Smith was murdered. Is that correct? And Brigham Young said, "Hey, you know, if anyone comes across one of the murderers of Joseph Smith, it's better that you kill that person and let him live." Something along those lines.
Oh, well,
have you heard that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
had heard.
I've heard something along. Maybe that was from the FLDS. I've heard that from somewhere. That was kind of where it began. So.
Yeah. So it's so interesting that gets like used against people when it's convenient for them to want to kill someone, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't agree.
So they use the blood atonement thing to kill the first prophet of the AUB, and then what? Was there someone in line that automatically stood up and was the next leader, or how did the transition from leadership go?
So I think they're called usually. Well, I don't know in this situation, but like before they die, I think is usually when they have someone in line. So it went Reuben Allred, Owen Allred, and then Lemoyne Jensen. Lemoyne is the one that I remember being the prophet growing up.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's so crazy from like an LDS perspective where you guys have like your prophets is like 3 prophets till you remember them. And I'm like, and for us, it's like goes back because I mean, I know it goes back the same at the beginning because it's still like Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff. So I know that the beginning's the same, but it's funny when you're in your own little world that you don't think about that your last few as prophets are the only ones that are specific to your own religion. Mm-hmm. Like you never think about it that way, right? Like you just think of your whole prophet lineage,
right?
Because that's what you're used to.
True.
So sorry, last question about the leadership here. So Reuben Allred, was he the prophet? So did your group believe in Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, John Taylor, not Wilford Woodruff, John Taylor, and then Reuben Allred?
I think, I'm pretty sure. I don't know all the last ones, but I'm pretty sure it just continued through. And then at that point, Reuben Allred took off the branch or whatever,
Okay, I see.
Okay. And then do you guys have apostles? Like, do you have the prophet and the presidency and then apostles similar to the LDS? Or like the FLDS ended up basically with just the prophet?
Yeah. There's like the prophet and then there's like, I think it's the Quorum of 12. And then the 70s. So there's like different leadership under it, but the prophet is like the prophet,
Okay.
So they still have 70s and stuff. That's way more similar to the LDS than the FLDS.
Yeah. Yes. It seemed like with the FLDS, it just came to a point where there were apostles and then there were just the prophet and his counselors and then bishops. And that's kind of where it ended. So it was really one man calling all the shots. So,
which is dangerous.
It's well, you can see what happened with Warren Jeffs and all of that. So, well, there's a little bit of backstory on the AUB leadership. How was it for you growing up in the religion as a young girl growing up?
It was good. I felt like I had the best childhood ever. I always had siblings there and, fun things. And that doesn't mean that really hard things didn't happen. For sure they did. But I felt like really grateful for the childhood I had and, my siblings and my family. And then probably not until I was a teenager when I was like experienced hard things or questions or maybe didn't feel like it was fair. Like I always wanted to be like, oh, I just wish I had a normal family. But you grow up and you're like, what is a normal family? No one has a normal family. They have divorced parents or 3 moms or 1 mom. Like, I don't know.
That's a very good point. What's normal? I agree.
When was your first memories of realizing that your family was different or like they didn't hide? I mean, since you were all living in the same house, you knew that there's a polygamous family. Were you able to go to school Do you have like a memory of the first time you were like, wait a minute, we do things differently than like other people?
Yeah. I would say the big thing was when my parents were like, you can't tell anyone. That was a big thing. Because we weren't in dresses. Like, people probably wouldn't, know. But we can't say, like, this is my sibling. Or my dad has 3 wives or something like that. So it was very, like, hush, hush. Don't tell anyone when we're in public. It's a secret. Stuff like that. I'm trying to think. I don't know that I ever noticed, like, oh, my family's so different. Because I was aware that there were other, families out there. I never did go to public school though, so that's not an exposure that I had.
Were you not allowed, or you just didn't end up going?
Some of my mom's older kids went, and then they do have like the church schools, but when my family moved south, when I was 9, there wasn't down there. So I went to preschool, I guess, in the church school. And then when we moved, my mom was like, you're not going to the schools here. So then I was homeschooled.
Okay.
And when I wanted to go to high school and things like that, my mom wouldn't let me. So it wasn't really a choice.
So being homeschooled, and you said that was when you had moved away. So they have like the schools that are church schools, and then they have homeschooling. Is it your group that had all the issues with the with the government and their schools?
That's the Kingstons.
That's the Kingstons. Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
The other polygamous.
I know. It's hard to keep track in Utah sometimes. But, I mean, you guys are like the 3 main big ones, though.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, when I first left the FLDS, and before I did any more research into all of this, it was the FLDS, the Kingston, the AUB, and really, those were the three big ones that I knew of. So those are I believe the ones that have the most members anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too.
So do you feel like you got a decent education? Because I mean, I can speak for myself on that, but how did you feel about it?
Yeah, I don't think I did, and I think that I don't know. It was just a weird situation. I was the youngest of my mom's kids. She was working full time, and then my mom's also a midwife, so she had to work a lot and be gone. And then when it got to me, it was kind of like, oh, here's a book and learn what you can. And I think I, didn't push myself as much as I should have too, but it was so guided. I don't know if you guys have ever read the book Educated. Have you heard of that book by Tara Westover?
No.
It's so good. I'll give her a shout out. But she grew up in a rural part of Idaho with very conservative parents. They weren't polygamous or anything, but she just talks about that struggle of not having an education and what it was like. And she goes on to be like so smart. And me and my sister read the book together, and I called her. I'm like, is this like hard for you to read? Because it was just so close to our stories. And her mom was a midwife. Like there was so many similarities. And it's so interesting because like each of my moms too did school very different with their kids. Like the second wife, did one way, and then my mom did one way. And it's so different throughout the group as well. Like Mark, my husband, went to regular public school his life and graduated and things like that. So
okay.
Wow, we'll definitely ask more questions about you and your husband coming up here. But
I did have a question as far as your mom, like working outside the home. Was that pretty typical that women were allowed to go and work, or did they have to be homemakers, or could she only work because she was a midwife? What did that look like?
The midwife thing, I mean, I think she started it before and was a nurse and then went into that. But it was definitely like part of her calling in the church. But she's an amazing midwife. And so yeah, it was like if you can work out of the home, or if you need to, you can. But then most women, I would say, are stay-at-home moms, because 2 of my dad's wives were home.
Okay. I don't know if we asked this question, but how many siblings do you have altogether, including from all the moms?
Oh, so 21 total. So 20.
Okay.
20 total.
Plus,
and then how many are from your mom?
8, and I'm the youngest of my mom.
Oh wow.
8. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of siblings as well.
Yes.
How closely did the each of the mothers marry your father? Like, were they all pretty close in age? Like, are all the siblings pretty close in age, or is there really like Sam's oldest sibling is older than my parents?
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
Because there was like a 15-year gap between the first wife and the second wife, and then that second wife was also way younger, and so it was like there's huge age gaps between
and then
children.
I have siblings that are way younger than me too,
so it's like the ranges go from like 60 years old to like now probably 16 years
early
old.
teens,
like early teen. So I was just
Wow.
curious if it was the same or if it was different and like they kind of kept them closer in age.
Yeah. I think my dad's third wife is a little bit younger, but not much. But there is a wide range of kids. I think my oldest sister is like 39 or 40, and then my youngest sister is like 9 or 10. So there is like not as big as a gap of Sam's family, but
but still pretty big.
Yeah. Well, each of my father's wives had 11 or 12 children as well.
Wow.
So just a very, very big family. So by the time I came around and showed up in the world, so a lot of my siblings were already older,
Adults.
married, and not living in the home anymore. And so, I mean, there were some of my siblings that I barely know because they were so much older than I was.
Wow.
So,
that's interesting.
Yeah. Did you have a close relationship with all of your siblings?
Yeah, most of them for sure. Especially, I have a brother and a sister that were all born in the same year. So one from each mom, and we've always been super close. So.
Oh, that's cool.
Really cool.
3 amigos.
Yep. My dad calls us his model 2000.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. Well, good. I mean, it sounds like you had a fairly decent childhood growing up. I mean, sounds similar to mine. I mean, I hear, and maybe you've heard from other families in the AUB, but I hear of people in the FLDS that had these really traumatic and horrible experiences and some things that they had to deal with in their families. And I always sit back and I'm like, man, I will advocate for you, but I have a hard time fully understanding that because I guess I was very lucky and had a family that didn't really, there wasn't a lot of abuse in my home and things like that. Of course, they had to deal with the leadership of the church, and that's a whole other story. But as far as my family, my parents, I felt like I had a good childhood and was very loved growing up.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like whenever I share, my story and still having a close relationship with my family, sometimes I kind of feel guilty because I'm like, I know so many people don't have that. And even people in the AUB that are sharing their stories of abuse and different things on TikTok and other platforms, I'm like, it's so valid. And I know that happened. And I don't want my story to be like, oh, it's so great. Because there were hard things, and there are things that I wish were different. Like going back to my education, like I don't feel like I have the education that I should have. There's a lot of things that I don't know and I've had to teach myself. And so that was hard. And like I went to just a tech college for dental assisting, and I had to take a test to get in, and I had to take it 3 times. And it was like basic stuff that I should have known but never learned,
Yeah, those type of things, like they're just not your fault. And I told Sam this a lot too, because he didn't have, I mean, they went to full-time construction work at like 12, 13 years old.
Education was talked about, like in my family, my parents would talk about how important education was, but then it wasn't really, I don't know. It was talked about, but it wasn't really practiced in my experience anyway. I didn't have a great education, and all I really wanted to do was do what all my older brothers were doing. And so it was a very young age, early teenage age, that I was out in construction and just working full time. Yeah, it was hard to get an education. And kind of to your point, I mean, when I moved out, I had to learn how to learn, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it was difficult for me to take a textbook and learn from that textbook because I hadn't learned how to learn or to study. However, it's hard to explain, but yeah, it took a lot of work to move past that.
Oh, but I get it. It's so. Yeah, for sure. I don't know. It's hard. And it just feels like, in a way, like not set up for success in that sense, where I'm like, oh, could have been so much easier if my parents made me do high school or things. But you see that a lot in the AUB, what you were saying, like boys or people will just drop out of school to join a construction crew. And it's like, because we're such hard workers. It's in our blood, I swear.
It is. It's in the blood for sure.
That's interesting that you saw the same thing in your group, because was everyone, almost everyone in the community where I grew up was in construction or in something, but all very, very hard workers. So interesting that is the same.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so construction, is that like the main thing that the AUB does, or like the FLDS is like almost exclusively like some kind of form of construction? Like every family has their niche, and they're like, one family will be framers and stoneworkers. Like his family does a lot of stone. They kind of, a
lot of very successful companies, but most of the companies are within the realm of construction in some way or another.
Yeah,
is that similar?
very similar. There's a lot of construction crews like framing and things like that. There's also like a cabinet shop and a welding shop and things like that. But most of them, I would say are construction, things like that.
Sounds like we lived in a similar situation, just on the opposite ends of the state.
Yep.
Wow.
So as far as like dressing and I mean dating we kind of touched on, but like dressing, were you able to blend in, or were there any like what was kind of the modesty standards for the AUB?
Yeah, I would definitely say growing up we could wear regular clothes, no like tank tops or super short shorts, things like that. Just dress modestly until you have garments, then it changes from there. But that's one thing I was super lucky, is to be able to just wear normal clothes for the most part. I would say some dress a little bit more old fashioned, or you can tell by the way they're layering several shirts, like, okay, they have garments on.
That sounds like the LDS. So I'm like, oh, I can identify with all of that, where you're wearing like, or if you want to wear a tank top, so then you'd wear the little Mod Bod shirts underneath it, the cap sleeve, t-shirts, and that's how you knew. And you had like that shirt, and then you had your tank top, and then you had a cardigan. Like, there's always so many layers.
We throw the word garment out there like everybody knows what that means. So what is garments to the AUB? What does that mean?
It's a piece of clothing that you wear under your regular clothing after you are endowed. So typically, like when you get married is when most people start wearing them. You can get endowed before as well. And then you wear them all the time.
Okay, so are you getting endowed? Does the AUB have temples?
No, they have an endowment. They have endowment buildings, but they don't have like an actual temple, like the LDS temple or things like that.
Okay, so that's like a cross in between, because the FLDS also have garments, but they wear them their whole lives from the time they're little kids.
Well, I believe it was from the moment we were baptized. Even earlier in some cases. But yeah, we wore the garments, but they would cover all the way to your wrist, to your neck, to your ankles. So it was no opportunity to wear shorts unless you want to look really funny.
That was going to be my next question, is if they were more typical to like the LDS garments, where it's like cap sleeve and down to your knee, or were they the full body?
Full body, collarbones, ankles, and
also the same.
What Sam said. Yeah.
Okay, so you grow up as a child wearing shorts and t-shirts, but then once you're married, then all of a sudden you're wearing jeans and button-up shirts, long sleeve shirts, that type of thing for the man. And for the women, what did the women wear after wearing garments?
They could wear jeans and stuff as well, or dresses and skirts and things like that. But again, they would layer them a lot. I know a lot of people that struggle with that. Like even some of my sisters have said it's so hard to wear what you want, and then the next day you're like, oh, the shirt doesn't fit right. Work with this, and it's just a big change.
Yeah. That's how it was for me in the LDS. I mean, and growing up LDS, I remember my mom would always say like the modesty standards in our house. She was like, your goal should be that when you do get your garments, it's not a hard transition. So she would be like, try to dress like you were getting ready for garments even before you had them, right? But the LDS, it was a cap sleeve and down to your knees for garments. So it wasn't as restrictive, but it was like always wearing like Bermuda shorts instead of short shorts, and always making sure you had at least a cap sleeve. And so, like I said, every family was a little bit different. For some girls, I know it was super hard going to like not being able to wear tank tops or like not wearing their short shorts anymore. And then my mom had always ingrained in me, like, kind of be prepared. So when we got married, like, I had like a little bit of my closet to throw away, but it really wasn't too much, because I had tried to like be ready for the moment and prepare for the garments. Yeah, but I didn't know that you guys had the full.
That would be a huge transition then for you.
Yeah.
So, and I know you said you never. Go ahead.
I was saying, same with what Melissa was saying. A lot of girls or men as well, I'm sure, will start wearing long sleeves as they're engaged, or getting used to it, like you said.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you never got to that point, but do you know what they said the garment was for, like what it represented or why it was necessary to wear the garment in the AUB?
I know, just like the basic of it, but I think the main things, the symbols and all of that, I never learned because I never got endowed, and it was, you don't talk about what happens in there. Just same with the LDS church. You don't talk about what happens in the temple. And so I didn't necessarily know all of the different ins and outs of it, but.
That is so interesting, because the garments that I grew up with didn't have any symbols. So it was just.
Same when you're endowed?
And they didn't have endowment sessions.
Not that I knew of. they had like sealings, celestial marriages, I guess you could call them, where they would go and meet with the prophet and he would marry them. But this was typically done in like a church office or sometimes even a hotel or something. So it wasn't any specific house that I know of, but it was very common to just meet with the prophet in his office or something, or some house, set aside for that, but nothing special like an endowment house or temple.
Weren't you guys told, because the temple that they were building in Texas when the raid happened, from pictures of it looks like they did have some like endowment rooms, like it was very similar to
they were getting to that point. They were getting to that point,
and they had told you guys that was all going to be happening later, like once Christ came, right? Like all the temple work. Because I always asked him, I was like, how did you guys believe in Joseph Smith and not try to do temple work? Like you saying there was an endowment house, I'm like, it makes sense. I'm sure that those are very similar between the LDS and the AUB endowment session. I'm guessing are both based in what Joseph Smith restored. So that like makes perfect sense to me. But I always asked him, I was like, how could you like believe in Joseph Smith and not have any of like the temple ordinances? But isn't that right? That it was saved for later.
So basically it was said that the temples were overrun by an apostate church. So the temple, the mainstream LDS church. And so the temple work was put on hold. Not that it wasn't important. Temple work is important, but it was put on hold until the people are righteous and worthy enough to pick it back up. And that would be done. A lot of the temple work and missionary work was going to be done during the millennium, is what we were told. Like when Christ returns and the world is made pure and perfect, then that is when all that work will be done. So, of course, everyone kind of twists scriptures and stuff to make it fit their agenda and fit their meaning of or religion. But it sounds like you in your group, you did a lot of the same things the mainstream LDS church is doing. Is that right?
Yeah. From my understanding, for sure. And like my mom would always say, like, we can't tell you what goes on in there, but the LDS church is wrong because they're changing the things. They're not leaving it how it was. So I always grew up thinking like, oh, they're doing it the original way. My family is, or the group, and then the LDS church has changed it. And then the same thing with the sacrament as well.
So tell me more about the sacrament, and then I'll go back and comment about the changes. Like, do you guys do the sacrament differently or originally?
I don't know. I'm sure it's the original way. That's what they say, but it's the same prayer as the LDS one. But the person in the priesthood can pass it to you, so you don't pass it down. They go to each person and pass it, and then pass the bread, and then the water. Everyone drinks out of the same cup, and you just take a little sip, and then you hand it back.
That's exactly how it was done in the FLDS. Exactly. And I'm telling you what.
Oh, gross to me now.
They got this little boy on the front row of Sunday school every single time because I did not want to drink after someone else. And you would see, okay.
All the things.
So I'm sorry, this is a very important topic to me for some reason, but you would see little children take a drink, and some of these children would have like runny noses and stuff, and they take a sip of this water, and I'm like, oh gosh. And I'm thinking, well, it's a good thing the Lord blessed it, and take a nice drink. But it was hard to drink after some people.
Did you guys drink water or wine?
Water. And same thing with the cup. Like, that is probably where the cold sore virus came from, was those cups. And then, but I was gonna say, kids couldn't take the sacrament. You had to be baptized when you were 8 to take the sacrament.
So no snotty-nosed kids.
Well, I'm trying to remember. Yeah. I don't remember what age they were. I just know they had runny noses. I'm trying to remember.
The LDS kids have it, right?
Yeah.
In the LDS church. I'm referring to the FLDS. Yeah.
But in the LDS, as a matter of fact, most parents, like even when we would take our little girl to church, and it's more of a like you get them in the habit of it. So basically from a pretty young age, I mean, I knew some people that would tell their kids they weren't allowed to until they were 8. But that seemed really hard because they would see like their little friends and stuff and everybody else would be. And so we were just always like, it's okay because it's teaching them the proper steps and what they should be doing in the future. So it was like a teaching opportunity for them to take it ahead of time. So they also had their own cups though. So just saying.
So at 8 years old, then that's when you started taking the sacrament in your group?
Yes.
Okay. That might have been the same in the FLDS. I honestly don't remember. I just I guess I
Yeah.
was too concerned about runny nose than I was about age.
The germs.
Yeah. And then going back to the temple thing, because I think that's really interesting, because for me, one of like my shelf breakers that really like hurt my testimony were changes within the temple that even I saw within the short period of time that I was attending the temple. And so when they say that, so they kept everything the exact same from when Joseph Smith or from like Brigham Young, because I know Brigham Young made changes as well. Do you know?
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to be doing like a little bit of a dive to see like
Yeah.
not, I don't want to reveal anything sacred or anything, but but that is very curious because I know there have been a lot of changes over the time, and that was something I had looked into. And so yeah, I can totally see them using that as a, hey, we are the truth because it was restored the way that it was meant to. Like if it's a restoration of all things, of all the truth, then it would make sense that it wouldn't change, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can see where that.
You know,
comes
you would
from.
think so, but you know, like for the FLDS and the AUB, we were like, stick to what was the original doctrine, the original things that were said. This is what we have to stick with because that's the way God wants it and intends it to be. So, you know, and growing up, that made perfect sense to me. And then you have people that are strong, active LDS members that say, no, it's good to change with the times because God reveals little by little, piece by piece, you know, and so things are supposed to be meant to be changed as time goes on. So it's so interesting that the different churches are taking things and switching them around so differently.
Yeah. So true.
What are the AUB's views towards the other polygamous groups and their views towards the LDS?
Very similar to like what Sam was saying. I guess you knew that they were there, but you just were like, oh, they're doing it wrong. But then even when I got like 10 or 12 or something, hearing about the Warren Jeffs groups, I'm like, oh, those are the crazy ones in a cult. Like they're crazy and they're following this crazy man. And then the LDS people was like, oh, they're good people, but they're not living the full gospel. But then we were the right ones. Like,
yeah.
So
yeah.
we were aware of it, but
it sounds like you would mingle with outsiders often. Is that right? Because you were kind of living amongst outsiders. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can see why someone in your group would look at the FLDS as a little bit more crazy because we were secluded off in our own little place. Who knows what's going on behind those walls, you know? So I can see why that would look very suspicious.
Yes.
Yeah, just a little suspicious.
I'll admit
it. So at what age did you start questioning what you had been raised in?